My great-aunt, Genevieve Devereaux, died as she had lived, in stubborn, opulent isolation. I, Liam, a pragmatic historian from New York, had never met her. My only connection was a shared, diluted bloodline and a name on a legal document that now declared me the sole heir to the Belle Rêve plantation. The name meant beautiful dream, a poetic cruelty I would only later come to understand. My plan was simple: fly down to Louisiana, appraise the crumbling antebellum relic, liquidate the asset, and return to my world of documented facts and logical conclusions. The final leg of the journey was a bone-rattling drive deep into the bayou, where paved roads surrendered to gravel and then to dirt. The air grew thick, humid, and heavy with the scent of sweet decay and wet earth. Belle Rêve emerged from the cypress swamp like a ghost. It was a once magnificent two-story manor, now in a state of elegant ruin. White paint peeled from the columns like sunburnt skin, shutters hung askew like broken teeth, and the entire estate was being slowly reclaimed by the swamp, with Spanish moss hanging from ancient oak trees like tangled gray hair. An old Cajun man named Jacques, who maintained the grounds in a loose sense, met me there. His eyes, the color of swamp water, held no warmth. "She's all yours now, Monsieur Liam," he said, his voice a low rasp. "The house, the land, and the burdens." "Burdens?" I asked, forcing a polite smile. He spat a stream of tobacco juice near my city shoes. "This place has a rhythm, a debt. Genevieve, she knew it. She played the song every night without fail." He gestured with his chin toward the house. "You'd be wise to do the same, and stay out of the mire after the sun goes down. The swamp, it gets hungry." He refused to elaborate, leaving me alone in the oppressive silence of my new inheritance. The inside of the house was a museum of faded grandeur. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light that pierced the grimy windows. Furniture was draped in white sheets like rows of patient corpses. In the grand parlor, amidst the shrouded furniture, stood an object of singular focus, a magnificent but clearly neglected grand piano, its ivory keys yellowed with age. My first days were spent in a historical trance. I was exploring, documenting. The sheer volume of history was staggering. I found letters from the Civil War, ledgers detailing sugar-cane profits, and in my great-aunt's study, a tower of leather-bound journals. These were her personal logs, dating back decades. That evening, I opened the most recent journal. Her handwriting was elegant but shaky. The first entry I read sent a chill through the humid air. October 12th. The air is heavy tonight. The croaking from the mire is louder. He is restless. Played the verse twice to be safe. The old tune soothes him, or perhaps it just reminds him the pact is still honored. The offering is taken. We are safe for another night. The verse? The pact? It sounded like the ramblings of a woman succumbing to dementia and isolation. I brushed it off and continued my exploration of the house. I found no sheet music near the piano, but when I lifted the key cover, I saw that 3 specific keys in the lower register were worn down far more than the others, their ivory tops chipped and smooth. The following days were spent devouring the journals, working my way backward through Genevieve's life and through the lives of the Devereaux before her. The further back I went, the clearer the horrifying picture became. The Devereaux family hadn't just built a plantation. They had made a deal. My ancestor, Augustine Devereaux, arrived in Louisiana in the 1830s with nothing. According to his journal, a fever took his wife and child. In his grief and despair, he wandered into the cypress swamp and encountered something ancient, an entity he called the Père de la Mousse, the father of moss. It was not a creature of flesh and blood, but a being of shadow, decay and memory, born from the primordial bog. A pact was made. Augustine offered the entity a place of honor, a tether to the world of the living, and in return, the father of moss would grant the Devereux line prosperity, ensuring their crops would never fail and their wealth would never wane. The offering was a nightly tribute left at the base of a colossal ancient cypress tree deep in the swamp, a tree Augustine called the offering tree. The nightly verse played on the piano was the lock on the cage. It was a specific, dissonant, and unsettling chord progression that acted as a sonic warg, reaffirming the boundaries of the pact and keeping the entity's influence confined to the swamp. The journals were filled with chilling accounts of what happened when the ritual was neglected. In 1923, a cousin visiting from Boston, a skeptic like myself, refused to play the heathen tune. That night, the journal described how every portrait in the house wept a thick, black substance, and the cousin was found the next morning in his bed alive, but an empty shell. His memories of his entire life, his family, even his own name, completely gone. The entity fed not on flesh, but on vitality, on the very substance of a person's history. I began to feel the house differently. It was no longer a historical artifact. It was a mausoleum, a place of perpetual silent negotiation with a predator. The oppressive humidity now felt like a presence. The shadows in the corners seemed to lengthen and deepen when I wasn't looking. I started having trouble recalling small details from my life in New York, the memories feeling distant and foggy, like old photographs. One evening, driven by a morbid need for proof, I took a small rowboat into the swamp just as the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and blood. I found the tree described in the journals. It was a monster, its base wider than a car, with massive roots snaking into the black water. At its base was a small, flat stone like an altar. It was empty.
The offering hadn't been made since Genevieve died. As dusk settled, the swamp came alive with a cacophony of insects and frogs, but underneath it, another sound began. A low, wet, guttural croaking that wasn't from any frog. It was a resonant, hungry sound that seemed to come from the mud, the water, and the air all at once. A thick, unnatural fog began to roll across the water, clinging to the cypress trees. I could feel a pressure in the air, a drop in temperature that was chilling to the bone. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement, a shape, darker than the surrounding shadows, tall and gaunt, made of what looked like dripping moss and river mud, standing among the distant trees. It had no face, only a sense of ancient, malevolent attention directed right at me. I rode back to the house in a blind panic, my city-born skepticism shattered into a million pieces. I burst into the parlor, my hands shaking. The house was cold, deathly cold. The portraits of my ancestors lining the walls seemed to look down at me, their painted eyes filled with a shared, terrified understanding. I remembered the worn piano keys. My hands hovered over them, my mind racing to recall the description of the nightly verse from the journals. It was 3 specific, discordant chords, played in a slow, repeating sequence. I played the first chord. It was a jarring, ugly sound that echoed through the silent house. But outside, the hungry croaking from the swamp seemed to pause. I played the second chord. The house groaned, and I heard a dry, scratching sound from the windows, like branches or long, thin fingers scraping against the glass. I played the third chord and completed the sequence. A low, mournful sigh seemed to pass through the entire estate, a sound of profound disappointment. The scratching stopped. The oppressive cold in the room lessened slightly. The pact, for now, was acknowledged. I spent the next few days in a state of high alert, a prisoner in my own inheritance. I performed the ritual every night at dusk, my heart in my throat as I played the ugly, protective melody. During the day, I continued my frantic research, looking for a way out. The answer, I found, was in Augustine's own journal, on a page written in a shaky, regretful hand. The pact is bound to the bloodline, but the house is its anchor. The entity cannot be destroyed, but its connection can be severed. The heart of the house must be silenced. The piano, the conduit of the verse, must be destroyed on the night of a new moon when the entity's power is at its weakest. But to do so is to break the pact forever. The consequences are unknown. It may leave, or it may take the house and everything in it as its final due. I checked the calendar. The next new moon was tomorrow night. It was my only chance. A terrifying gamble. Stay here and become a slave to the ritual until I faded into a forgotten memory, or risk everything to break the curse. The next night I was ready. The air was thick and still. I didn't play the verse at dusk. Instead, I waited, an old fire axe in my hands, my eyes fixed on the piano. As the last light of day vanished, the house grew deathly cold. The fog rolled in from the swamp, thicker and more menacing than ever before. The croaking started. Louder this time, filled with a triumphant, hungry anticipation. Then came the scratching, at every window, every door. The whispers surrounded the house, a chorus of mud and decay, promising me a quiet, peaceful oblivion if I would just come outside. I ignored it all. I walked to the piano. I looked at the portraits on the wall. The figure of Augustine Devereux was no longer in his frame. The canvas was blank. The entity was already feeding, erasing the past. I looked at my reflection in the polished black wood of the piano. My face was pale, my features slightly blurred, less defined than they were a week ago. I was fading. "The debt is paid," I whispered, my voice a defiant tremor in the darkness. I raised the axe high above my head and brought it down with all my strength on the center of the piano. The sound was not of splintering wood and snapping strings. It was a high-pitched, inhuman shriek of pain that erupted from the instrument. The entire house shook violently. The portraits rattled on the walls. The piano convulsed, and a thick, black, tar-like substance bled from the wood where the axe was embedded. Outside, the chorus of whispers turned into a single deafening roar of pure, unadulterated rage. The windows of the parlor shattered inward, and the unnatural fog poured into the room, cold and suffocating. Within the fog, I could see them, dozens of tall, gaunt, shambling figures made of moss and mud and shadow, their forms indistinct but their intent unmistakable. They were pouring out of the swamp, converging on the house. I stumbled back, tripping over a shrouded chair, my eyes fixed on the ruined piano. The shriek had stopped. The house was now filled with the sound of the swamp, the croaking, the whispering, the sound of wet, heavy things being dragged across the floorboards. The father of moss had been tethered to this house for 2 centuries. I had just broken its anchor, and now it was free to come inside and collect its due in person. I was no longer a keeper. I was simply the final meal in a house that was no longer a beautiful dream, but a beautiful tomb.